Are you able to see the screen? Are you able to see the screen? PPT screen?
No, ma'am. It's showing the Zoom app screen.
Are you able to see the PPT screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So what we discussed yesterday? So in the previous class, we discussed the stakeholders of software engineering. Then we discussed the activities, software engineering activities, the 7 activities of software engineering, like requirement specification, design, modeling, programming, quality assurance, deployment, managing the process. So each and every aspect we discussed in detail. Then started with the software quality. Are you able to see the screen now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So then we started with the software quality. We discussed the 2 types of, like explicit software quality and implicit software quality aspects. Then we discussed the various features or characteristics which we need to consider while checking for the quality of any software product. So if your software is having the following attribute, then we can say your software is having the quality standards, or it can be accepted in the universal platform. So what are the characteristics or features we need to implement while developing any software means we should check for the usability, efficiency, reliability, maintainability, and reusability. So usability means the software should be usable to the person, the end users, or if your software is having all the features which are specified in the requirement specification, then it is easy to user friendly to install and use by the end users. Then the usability quality is existing in your software. And efficiency means it should produce the perfect result, or the calculations and the various transactions, it should produce the exact or efficient result. Then only the end users will trust your software product. And reliability means it should work in any it should work based on the constraints, it should not fail, and it should be reliable to the end users. And maintainability means the cost, memory space, and installation and other guidelines, it should be having a user-friendly characteristics so that the maintenance and debugging the software will be easy for the users. And reusability means it should be usable again and again. We can able to modify the software, and we should it should provide the option for updating the content so that the same software code can be reused in different applications, or it can be modified or updated. So these are the software quality characteristics we need to consider while constructing any software. And the quality is different for different kind of stakeholders. So we already discussed the 4 stakeholders of software engineering: the users, customers, developer, and a development manager. There's a quality for an user will be, it should be easy to learn and efficient to use and help get work done. Then the users will say the software is qualitative one. And for the customers, it should solve the problem, and it should be acceptable cost. It should not be more cost or very less cost. And the whatever money they are paying to the software, it should fulfill their needs. And for the developers, if the design is easy and the maintenance and components are easy to maintain, and if it provides reusable software codes, then the developer will say the quality of the software is good. And for the development manager, if more number of quantities are sold and many users or customers are using their software product, and please the customers' needs, and while costing less, and the development and maintenance cost are very less, means in development manager's point of view, the quality of the software is good. Then we discussed other parameters of software quality, and the software quality also can be based on short-term needs as well as long-term needs. The quality of any software can be defined in short-term as well as long-term. Long-term, the maintenance cost and customer, it should update. It should have the updating features, and we can able to modify or add and delete the content of the software in future according to the needs. Then the long-term quality of the software is good. In short-term, it should fulfill the customer's immediate needs, and if sufficiently efficient for the volume of data. So the cost, time, as well as the memory space it occupies is less, and it fulfills the needs of any customer. In short term, the quality of the software is good. So these quality aspects we already discussed in yesterday's class. Then we started with other difficulties and risk factors. This also yesterday itself we discussed the complexity and large number of details we should consider, and uncertainty about the technology. So the technology should be available to all the people so that they will make use of your software product, and uncertainty about the requirements. So if your software product is having all the requirements specified, if it is implemented in your project, that should be considered. And software engineering skills, if the programmer or the developer is not having the enough skills, then the product will not be up to the standard. And constant change, if you are changing the functions or variables or the software hardware configuration, software configuration platform, then we cannot expect a good quality software. And political risk factors also we should consider. We should obey the rules and regulations of the government policies as well as the organization policies. We should not affect any political party or anyone, so that the software will not have any problem or risk in future. Then we started with the introduction to object-oriented software engineering. So in object-oriented software engineering, so we are going to construct our software products based on objects and classes. So we know very well classes are user-defined data types. The instance of any class is called objects. And based on classes and objects, we can implement all the object-oriented features in our software programming. So the various aspects of software, object-oriented software engineering are data encapsulation, so we'll have the basic parameter called classes. We know very well classes are abstract data types. They are a declaration part of any data what we are going to use in our project. We know very well classes are same as structures. In structures, we'll have different types of variables, but in case of classes, we'll have collection of different types of variables along with the functions. The variables within the class are called data members. The functions within the class are called member functions. So if you create entities or instance or variables from classes, we'll get objects. So the objects are runtime entities or dynamic components of classes. So by using the classes and objects concepts, we can implement other object-oriented properties like inheritance, polymorphism, data abstraction, data encapsulation. So we know very well inheritance means want to create, or if you want to add new features into your classes, instead of modifying the class, we can create the derived classes. So we will keep the base class as it is. The new features, new functions will be added into a new class called a derived class or child class. So we'll maintain the parent-child relationship between the classes. And polymorphism means we can have more than one function with the same name. Poly means multiple form for the same functions. Say for example, if you have student, or if you say for example, if you have a function called assignment, or if you have a function called quiz or something. So we can have the same function quiz with the different types of variables. Say it may be, well, we can create one quiz class for one quiz function for different subjects. The number of it will take different arguments as well as the return type of the function will be different. So we can have multiple form for the same function. Say for example, add function or display function. So we can have the same function display with a different number of arguments and different return types. Data abstraction means we will take the abstract entity or the core components of any object. So that is called data abstraction. So classes are the best examples for abstract data types. So it takes the abstract variables and abstract functions, and both the data and functions are encapsulated with each other. So the outside other classes and functions cannot access it without the permission of the base class, or without based on the visibility of the variables and functions. Say we'll have the visibility or access specifiers like public, private, and protected. So based on, if it is public, it will be accessible in derived classes. If it is private, it will be accessible within the class alone. So these are the basic or fundamental concepts of object-oriented software engineering. And in the previous class itself, we discussed about classes and objects. So again, we will discuss. So we know very well classes can be represented so the class is and user-defined data type. So you have class name followed by the number of attributes or variables or characteristics of the class, and we'll have the functions which we are going to use along with the data members. So we'll have class name followed by the variables. If you take the here the class is book. So here the variables within the class book are book title, language of the book, author of the book. So the title is of string type and language is of, so again the character type, and the name of the author is also string type. And the operations which we can perform on a class book are add book, delete book, update book, and view the book. So we have the class called book. The various here class is book, and the objects are software engineering book, software testing book, and software quality book. So the class book, we have three instances or three objects: object 1, object 2, and object 3. And while naming any class, we should follow some standard parameters. Say we have ASCII standard, American Standard Code for Information Interchange. They have given some norms or guidelines which we need to follow while creating any class name. So use capital letters. The class name should always start with a capital letter. So the bank account is a valid class name. So here bank B is in small letter, bank account, this is invalid one. So it will not be the program will work, but it is not up to the universal standard. And we should always use singular nouns. No need to use 2 words or 3 words or a big line. So better use singular nouns. Use the right level of generality. Say we can, if you have a class called city, city means it differs from place to place. So we can use the term municipality. It will specify a particular organization or institute. So the place where we will get some official documents. So instead of municipality, if you are using the word city, it takes different meanings in different occurrences. Make sure the name has only one meaning. Say bus has several meanings. So if you want to specify a particular motor vehicle as bus, you specify whether it is an public bus or it is an air bus or tourist bus. So you have to travels bus. So you can use the proper name while naming any classes. So these are the major standards which we need to follow while naming any class. Then we discussed objects. For me, out so far, we started with object-oriented software engineering. Then we discussed the object-oriented, what is object orientation, the main characteristics of object orientation like classes, objects, inheritance, polymorphism, and friend functions, virtual functions, all those things. Then we discussed what is class. Then we are discussing objects. Any doubts so far? The screen is visible to you, PPT screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Vamsi? Yeah. So we know very well objects are instance or dynamic entities or runtime components of any class. So the objects will have, say for example, we have the object called data. So it's having its own attributes called data members and functions called member functions. So objects are runtime entities that may represent a person, place, or any item. Each object contains a data and code to manipulate the data. Data represents the attributes of the object and the functions represent the behavior of the object. So the data means within the object will have set of variables and set of functions. The variables are called data. So they are nothing but the characteristics or attributes of any class. And the functions means the various operations which we can perform on the object. Objects takes up space in memory and have an associated add link structure in C. So whenever we create any object, the corresponding memory space will be allotted in the memory. Say the corresponding constructor will be executed. So the constructor will reserve memory for the particular object. So here the diagram shows you the object representation. So when a program is executed, the object interact with by sending messages to one another. So here we created 3 objects, object 1, 2, 3. So each object is having its own collection of data members and member functions. And so each one is having its own memory space, and initial value will be assigned. Whenever we update the values or we give values, the values will be updated. And we can perform the various operations on the objects, like performing the using integers, characters. We are performing addition, subtraction, multiplication. The same way we can add 2 objects, we can delete objects, we can delete one object from another object by using operator overloading concepts. Then we discuss the difference between classes and objects. So we know very well class is an data type. It's a declaration part of the data, and it generates objects from classes. From the class declaration, we create a number of objects. Class not of location. So when declaring any number of any class, no memory space will be allotted. Just it's a declaration part, or it shows the structure of the object. When we create actual object, then only the instance will be created, memory will be allotted, the initial values will be assigned, and the actual values will be assigned during the runtime. And once we come out from the function or program, main program, by using destructor functions, the objects can be automatically destroyed. The memory will be released for further usage. So classes cannot be manipulated since it is not available in memory. So on classes, we cannot perform any operation. Classes are just a declaration part. We cannot perform, we can create new classes by using inheritance or using templates concept. It's only the declaration part. It is a static component, so it will not change. Once the class is declared, the content, the number of attributes, number of functions are fixed. We cannot change it further. If you want to change it, we have to totally modify, or we have to go for inherited classes. But in case of objects, object is an instance of the class. So it takes different values during different occurrences, or whenever we run the program and we call the function object, and the values will change. So it will definitely the time will differ. So if you give the same value also, the time is changing. First time execution, you may give some values. Second time execution, it will take some other value. And it gives life to classes by adding features. So the actual values, the actual operations are performed in objects only. So the static class is getting life by getting the new values through objects. So objects are runtime entities, or we can say it is a dynamic component. It takes different values during different occurrences. Objects occupy memory locations. Whenever an object is initialized or created, the corresponding memory for all the variables and functions will be reserved using the constructor function. And objects, if you create your own constructor function or not, the default constructors will be created. The same way the default destructors will be initialized when we come out from the main program. Objects can be manipulated. So we can perform all the manipulations on objects, like we can perform arithmetic operations, bitwise operations, as well as we can perform logical operations. So we have a feature called operator overloading. So like performing the addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, comparison, all those things on normal variables. We are performing all those things on normal variables like integers, characters. Now the same way we can perform all the arithmetic and logical operations on objects also using operator overloading concept. So any doubt so far? So any doubt? So up to this we discussed in the yesterday's class itself, in the second class from 3:15 to 4:15. So there was some technical issue in the connectivity. So we discussed up to this in the previous class. So any doubt so far? Any doubt? Have you seen the Google Classroom? All of you joined in the Google Classroom? Where the Vyas? Are you in a Google Classroom? Manikanta? I think there are out of 115 students, I think around 70 students are in the Google Classroom. Today I uploaded an assignment 1 question. Have you checked in the Google Classroom? Have you got the notification? Komal Patak?
Yes, ma'am.
So have you checked the Google Classroom? You got the notification for assignment 1?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's dated 6th August. I have given you 1 week time. You need to upload the assignment on or before next Thursday, 13/8, August 13 before. So in each module, you will be having one assignment, minimum one assignment to maximum 2-3 assignments. And you will be having multiple choice question, MCQ test also, MCQ quiz also of minimum 10 questions to 1 or 2 MCQs. Each MCQ will have 10 questions. So for each module, you will be having 1 or 2 MCQs. Everything will be conducted through Google Classroom only. So everyone should join in Google Classroom. All of you got Jain University email IDs?
Yes, ma'am.
CR? Yeah, can you share me the email IDs? I will check and verify. I think somebody shared. I need to check it out. If you are having the Jain University email IDs of all our students, you please share with me. I will check. The missing students I will try to add. If you are not getting any notification, you can send me the WhatsApp message. Okay, any doubts so far in object-oriented software engineering? So we started with classes, objects. The third concept is called inheritance. So what is the meaning of inheritance? So the word inheritance is used in biological term. So what is inheritance? So we have the heredity. So heredity means what? The the characteristics of grandfather will have the 50%, the grandparents, father, grandmother and grandfathers, 50% characteristics will be given to the father. The same way, the father and mothers, 50% characteristics will be, DNA characteristics will be, combination of both will be, the kids will be having. So like that, the heredity, DNA structures, characteristics will be followed for 7 generations. So any child will have parents, father and mother's characteristics 50%, grandparents, grandmother's characteristics another 50%, 25%, the super grandfather's characteristics another 12.5%, like that. So the combination of characteristics, features will be passed to each and every generation. The same way, the same real-time feature we are implementing in object-oriented programming. So this, for these properties are, the owners will be the child's and grandchildren's. The same way, so if you are having a class, say here we have the class called class name member, it's having the attributes like ID, name, date of birth and phone. And the member functions like add member, delete member, update member and view member. So we want to add some additional features. So within the base class member, we want to add different members, like the member may be a student member, or he may be a faculty member or employee member. So in that case, no need to create again the same variables. So here in the student member, no need to define the same variables like ID, name of the student ID, student name, student date of birth, student phone number. So we can inherit a new class by taking the member as a base class. We are creating a new member called derived class called student. So the student class will also have the same the basic parameters from the parent class like ID, name, date of birth and phone. Along with that, it's having additional features like roll number and school of the student. The same way, the faculty member also will have the same attributes and same functions. Here also we can use the base class data members and data member functions in the derived class called faculty. Along with the basic class properties, we'll have the additional properties like ID of the faculty, school of the faculty, whether CSE faculty or ECE faculty, EEE faculty, like that. And the employees also, the basic parameters along with the additional parameters like ID of the employee, division of the employee, and the basic parameters will be employee ID, employee name, employee date of birth, employee phone number will also be used. And all 4 functions, student can also make use. And when you are calling and creating an object called f dot add member means the faculty data will be added. The same way, if you create an object called employee e dot add member means the employee's data will be added. So we have a base class called member. From the base class or parent class, we are creating the derived classes called student, faculty and employee. So each derived class inherits the attributes of its base class, and its process is known as inheritance. The existing classes are called the base or parent classes, or we'll call it as super classes, and the new classes are called the derived classes or child classes or subclasses. So here member is the base class, parent class or super class. All 3 names are belongs to the first class, and we are creating new classes called derived classes from the base class, or it may be a child class or it may be subclass. So you got the idea what is inheritance. So inheritance is the process by which objects of one base class acquire the properties of objects of another class. So the base class properties will be transferred to the child classes as it is. We can add additional features to an existing class without modifying it. So we can add new features by adding additional characteristics and functions without modifying the base class. The advantage of inheritance is it expresses commonality among classes and objects. So there will be some common properties among all the base class. If it is a derived class, all the derived classes will take the common properties from the base class. Allows code reusability. So we are reusing the base class again and again. Highlights relationships. So a relationship is created, which is parent, which is child. Helps in code organization. So no need to modify the base class again and again. So we can organize the programming in a structured way. So these are the main advantages of using inheritance. So in inheritance, we are having the terms called superclass, inheritance, and hierarchies and inheritance. So superclass means the base class or parent class is called the superclass. It contains the features common to all the set of subclasses. All the subclasses will have the parent class properties in common. Inheritance hierarchies shows the relationship among the superclass and subclass. The triangle shows the generalization. So this triangle structure shows, so from the base class, all the derived classes are created. So here, this is our base class. These are the 3 derived classes. So we'll use the generalization concept. Here we'll use the triangle. It means this is our base class. From the base class, all the 3 derived classes are generated. So this symbol, that is blank, the triangle symbol connecting the subclasses represents the hierarchy. So the parent class is the superclass, level 1. Child classes are in this level 2. And inheritance, implicit possession of by all subclasses of features defined in the superclass. So in general, inheritance means the base class properties will be shared by all the derived classes, or the parents' characteristics and functions is common to all the child classes which are derived from the parent class. So the diagram shows you the hierarchical relationship as well as the generalization concept. So we have the mathematical object. So this is our parent class. From the mathematical object, we are creating the derived classes called shape, point, and matrix. So from again shape, the shape may be a 2D shape or 3D shape. Again from 2D shape, it may be an ellipse or polygon. Again the ellipse may be a circle. So here parent class, child class, grandchild class, like that we are getting the hierarchy. So here we will say there is a level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, and level 6. Or we will say degree 1, degree 2, degree 3, degree 4, degree 5. Degree means the number of inherited classes. So the same way, shape can be 3D shape, it may be a line or it may be a plan. So the diagram shows you how the inheritance is represented. So we have the superclass, subclasses, and the generalization means that the shape, point, matrix, all 3 derived classes are generalized or created from the base class called mathematical object. So this is the generalization symbol. So these 2 subclasses, siblings, or belongs to the same shape 2D base class. The next topic is called polymorphism. So poly means many, and morphism means forms. It means many forms for the same function. So representing any item in many forms. So we can represent any data or function in many forms. There are 2 types of polymorphism: compile time polymorphism and runtime polymorphism. So compile time means it is a static one, runtime means it is a dynamic function. So requires that there are multiple methods of the same name. So it means in general, we can have more than one method, multiple methods. Methods means functions. We can have multiple functions with the same names. Say for example, here the diagram shows you how the polymorphism and is represented. So we have a function called shape 2D. So the class is shape 2D. So it's having only one attribute called center, and having the functions called the triangle, get center, rotate, change scale, get area, all those things. So here we have a function called get bounding rectangle. So the same function is in the derived class also, get bounding rectangle. Again, the same function get bounding rectangle is in the circle derived class also. In the ellipse derived class also, base class, 2 classes, ellipse shape and polygon. Again, from the ellipse shape, we have two more derived classes called circle and ellipse. From the polygon, we have 2 derived classes, arbitrary polygon and simple polygon. So in the base class also, we have a function called get boundary rectangle. The derived class also, we have a function called get boundary rectangle. Here also we have the same function, get boundary rectangle. And here also we have the same function, get boundary rectangle. And here also we have So in all derived classes, we have the same function. So it means that the same function takes different values during different occurrences based on the object. So if you create an object called, this is a base class, and if you create an object here, say polygon, so P, the polygon object P is created. So then if you call P dot get boundary rectangle, the whatever definition we have given here, this will be executed. The same way, if you create an object called arbitrary polygon, arbitrary polygon object A. So if you call the function A dot get the same function, then the corresponding operations from this particular derived class will be executed. Here also we have get boundary rectangle. If you create an object called R for rectangle class, so if you call the function R dot get boundary rectangle, the function whatever we defined here will be executed. It means that the derived class functions overrides the base class operations. So any doubt in the inheritance and polymorphism? So here we have inheritance also. So base class, derived child class, grandchild classes. So the level 1, level 2, level 3 hierarchy is maintained. So we have inheritance. Polymorphism means here the same function get boundary rectangle is represented here in all the many of the derived classes. So based on the object, if you call the function, if you create an Eclipse object called E, if you call the function E dot get boundary rectangle, this function will be executed. So it means always the derived class functions will be executed in case of polymorphism whenever we call if the same function is represented in base class and derived classes, and based on the object, the corresponding function will be executed, or in general, the derived class function will be executed. It's called operator or function overriding. Then the object-oriented paradigms. There are two types of paradigms, a procedural paradigm and object-oriented paradigm. So an approach to the solution of problems in which all computations are performed in the context of objects. The objects are instance of classes. So we know very well objects are instance of classes, which are the data abstractions, contains procedural abstractions that operate on the objects. So the class is an abstract entity. So it is having collection of objects or instance of the classes, and within the classes we'll have data abstractions as well as functional abstractions. So it will have a collection of data, collection of variables, and collection of functions. The variables as well as functions also abstract in the form of abstraction. The running program can be seen as a collection of objects collaborating to perform a given task. So whenever we execute the program, the objects will be initialized and objects will be created, and the operations are performed, transactions are done based on the objects. So what is object-oriented? In object-oriented paradigm, what do you mean by procedural paradigm? Means software is organized around the notation of procedures. Procedural abstraction works as as long as the data is simple. So we know very well within the classes we have procedures or functions, and the operations are performed through the functions, and the member functions or members will be used within the procedures. Adding data abstraction groups together the pieces of data that describe some entity, helps reduce the system's complexity such as records and structures. So whenever we define the functions within the class, the members of the class will be used in the procedures, and the functions should be very simplified one. The accessibility like private, public, protected, or specified within the classes itself, so that the complexity can be reduced. And object-oriented paradigm, organizing procedural abstractions in the context of data abstractions. So in object-oriented paradigm means the format or the framework or the method or the methodology. If you create any programs by using object-oriented concepts and techniques, and the framework which we follow will be called object-oriented paradigm, or we will say the pattern or the protocol. The protocol what we are using for the program to create the project is object-oriented concepts. Then we will say it is an object-oriented paradigm. So within the OO paradigm, we are using the abstraction as well as the data abstractions. the data abstractions and the data function member functions are used to implement the object-oriented paradigm. So they are showing you how the procedural and object-oriented paradigm will look like. So in case of procedural paradigm or procedural-oriented languages, we'll have main program. Then we'll perform the transactions. Say the transactions are credit, debit, compute interest, and compute fee. So these are the operations. So how the structure will look like means, so it will follow the top-down approach. So we'll have the main program. Within the main program, we'll have the declaration part. We'll have the various functions. The functions will be called and executed. And the functions will be according to the sequence of activities. The functions will be executed one by one. So that will be the structure of procedural paradigm. In case of object-oriented paradigm, we can use a bottom-up approach also. So in bottom-up approach, we will have, say we have the classes. The class is having the variable called account, the functions called credit and debit. And from the class, we are creating the derived classes, checking account and saving account. So it may be current account and saving account. So in the saving account, we are performing the operations like compute interest and compute fees. And in a current account or checking account also, we are performing compute interest and computing fees. So in case of object-oriented paradigm, everything, the operations, everything is focused on objects and classes. So we'll have the classes. From the classes, we'll have base class as well as derived classes. We'll have the generalization concept. And the programming, various functions, everything is focused on. Within the classes, we have functions. So here, based on the classes and based on the objects, what we are creating, and whatever object we are calling in the main program, according to the sequence, the programs will be executed. So in object-oriented paradigm, everything is based on classes and the corresponding derived classes and objects. In case of procedural paradigm, we need to have separate declaration part. We need to have separate functional declaration and functional implementation, and there should be some main program. The functions will be called in the main program. According to the sequence of order, the functions will be executed. There will be some opening and closing statements. But in case of objects, we'll have classes and objects. According to the classes and objects, the programs will be executed. So that is the main difference between procedural paradigm and object-oriented paradigm. Procedural paradigm means it is followed in structured programming languages like C, BASIC, Fortran, COBOL, all those languages. In case of object-oriented programming languages like C, Java, Python, we are using object-oriented paradigm concept. So any doubts so far? So far we discussed about object-oriented software engineering. So we discussed the object-oriented constructs like classes, objects, inheritance, polymorphism, and then we discussed what is the difference between classes and objects. Then the differences between object-oriented paradigm and procedural paradigm. Next, we are entering into software process models. So any doubts so far? So any doubt? Whatever we discussed with the object-oriented software engineering. Abhinav? Abhilash? Any doubt so far? What is object-oriented software engineering? What are the main features or characteristics we will consider? Muhal? Any doubt? Shall we proceed with the next topic?
No doubts.
Okay, our next topic is called software process models. So we already discussed in software engineering, whenever we create any project, we need to follow some standard techniques and methods or a systematic approach to create the software project. So the software computer programming were created and used for the long 70 years, some more than 60 to 70 years. So for the past 60 years, they were following different techniques. They tried so many methods and different approaches to create the program. So based on their experiences, they given you the guidelines, or they given you the best practices to be followed to create an to create an effective software project. So the best practices or the guidelines or the methods which can give you the effective result are represented by using the terms process models. Process model in the sense a particular model or methodology. Say for example, if you want to create an doll or something, we'll use some mold, or the same way if you want to construct an house, we'll go for some blueprint. So if you want to design a machine, we'll have a model, or we'll have an framework. So you say if you want to create an Ganesha statue, we'll have a mold. So in that mold, if you put to the plaster of Paris the metal the clay, we'll get the particular corresponding shape. The same way, they given you a model or framework or a methodology. If you follow that particular model, you will get the correct result, because it gives you an easy way to do the programming, or it gives you a framework or a blueprint. If you follow the blueprint steps or the roadmap, we will come out with the correct result. So whenever we create a program, we'll write the, we'll declare the variables, we'll define the functions, then we'll call the main program, execute, compile, execute, we'll check for the result. So same way, we need to follow some systematic steps or activities to create an effective software. We need to consider all the activities in our software project, so that all the parameters, all the quality aspects will be represented, or it will be done in our project. So the software process models are a simplified representation of the software processes presented from a specific perspective. So in models, what we are going to discuss is software processes and the specific perspective according to the simplified approaches, how the software can be done. Examples of software process perspectives are, we have three different process models or perspectives called workflow perspective, data flow perspective, and role and action based perspective. So in workflow, what we will do, so it will take the it represents inputs, outputs, and dependencies. So in workflow perspective, we will consider what is our input, what is our expected output, and what are the dependent parameters we need to consider. So that is called workflow perspective. So any worker or any working environment, they will consider what we are giving as input, what are the processes we are doing, and what is the expected output. So that is called workflow model. And data flow perspective means represents data transmission activities. So in data flow perspective, we will consider, we'll give more focus to the data, and we will check how the data is modified in each stage and what is the final output. So that is called data flow perspective. And the role and action based perspective represents the roles, activities of people involved in the software process. So in here we will have all the people who are all involved in the software development process. The roles will be assigned to each and every person. So the designer will take care of the design activities, analyst, software analyst will take care of the analysis activities, the programmer will take care of the programming, coding aspects, and the testing, software testers will consider, they will do all the testing operations. The tech lead or project manager will organize all the people. So like that, we'll have set of people. Each people will do their operations according to their roles and responsibilities. So these are the three models of software process. So a structured set of activities required to develop a software system. So we need specification to create any software. We need the design model. We need a validation process and evaluation process. So these are the activities we need to perform in any software project. So whatever the software project or whatever may be the model we are going to use, we need to perform the life cycle activities. We should go for software specification, software design, software validation, software evaluation. So if you do all the four activities, then only you will come out with the best result. A software process model is the sequence of phases for the entire life cycle of lifetime of the product. So the software process model gives you an life cycle stages. The various stages of the software process is represented using the models. So you got the idea what is software process models. So we have three types of models: workflow model, data flow model, and action and role based model. In all the models, we need to perform the same operations, but the different terms will be used according to the model. Say the various four major are specification, design, validation, and evaluation. So we have more than thousands of models. So depending upon the project, depending on, say, if it is an application project, we'll use different models. Scientific project, we'll use different models. If it is a social science-based project, we will use a different model. If it is web-based applications, we'll use a different model. Based on the domain, say student domain, say the college or university kind of projects, we'll use a different model. Or if it is hospital domain, or if it is banking sector or government sector, according to the domain, according to the type of project, if it is mathematical based calculations, we'll go for different models. So according to the type of project and activities performed, we'll use different models. There are more than 1,000 models, but the effective models, the models which use the perfect result or efficient result in a systematic way, those models are used by the software professionals for a long time. So the six basic models which are used nowadays for a long time, based on its effectiveness and based on the results, are called, first one is called waterfall model, and second one is opportunistic model, second one is phased released model, spiral model, evolutionary model, model. So these are the models used by the software engineers for a very long time, because these particular models are giving the perfect result. So what is a waterfall model means, say the diagram shows you the various activities what we are going to perform in waterfall model. So the model represents a waterfall structure. So it's having some stages. So if you complete the first stage, we will come to the second stage. If you complete the second stage, then we will come to the third stage. So it looks like we are following various stages like waterfall. So we are calling it as waterfall model. This model is the very old model. We will call it as a traditional waterfall model or a traditional software development model or basic waterfall, basic software development model, because this is the very old model. The steps and stages what we are using in this model is used in many of the other models also. Whatever model we are using today, like fourth generation techniques or object oriented techniques or prototype models or any web-based application models, all are the core idea is the same stages. So in all our software development processes, we will have the same activities. Say so the first stage in here is requirements gathering and definition. So we need to collect all the requirements of our software project, or a requirement specification will be created. Based on the requirements, we will create this requirement specification. Then once it is over, we'll come to the software design. Then we will come to the next step, software implementation. Once this is implementation is over, then we'll come to the integration and deployment stage. Once it is over, then we'll come to the maintenance stage. So this is the fundamental model for all the software engineering process activities. And the only main drawback of this particular model is there is no reverse process. So once you complete this first stage, we will come to the second stage. We cannot go back. There is no feedback connectivity. So we cannot go back and change the requirement. Once the specification is over, this process is over, it will come to the design stage. During the design stage, if you want to add any specification, there is no feedback activity. So we cannot go back to specification. So that is the only drawback of software model. It is in separate distinct phases of specification and development. It's having the following different stages. It's having all the 6 stages: requirements analysis, specification, design, implementation, integration and development, and maintenance. So any doubt in the software waterfall model? Any doubt? So if you take the waterfall model, we have the requirements and gathering and analysis. Systems, services, constraints and goals are established by the consultant with the system user. So the various requirements for the software, like services, constraints, goals, will be collected here in this particular stage. This collection is over, requirements gathering is over, we'll come to the second stage, called specification and system design. Based on the requirements, we'll go for the system design. So partitions the requirements to either hardware or system, hardware or software system. Establish the overall system architecture. Software design involves identifying the fundamental software system, abstractions, and their relationships. So here, based on the requirements, we'll write down the system design aspects. So we'll prepare the software design, hardware design, functional design, and abstractions and relationships. Once the specification design activity is over, we'll come to the third stage called implementation and unit testing. So here we will go for the implementation, actual coding and programming. Software design is realized as a set of programs or program units. Unit testing involves verifying each unit meets its specification. Once the programming is done, then we will check each and every function and component or unit using the unit testing method. Once all the functions or components are working perfectly, then we will integrate all functions, all the units together to get the full system. So that is called integration and deployment. Individual programs are integrated and tested as a complete system to ensure the product is deployed and released into the market. So all the components are integrated together and the complete product will be released. So the next stage is operation and maintenance. Once the product is released, there are some issues which come up in the client environment. To fix those issues, patches are released. So if there is any issue in the end user side, to fulfill the gaps and issues, we'll go for the maintenance activity and we'll solve the problems. So these are the 6 stages what we follow in waterfall model. So what is the advantage and what is the disadvantages of this waterfall model means? It is inflexible partitioning. So once you complete the first stage, we'll come to the second stage. There is no flexibility. This makes it difficult to respond to changing customer requirements. Therefore, this model is only appropriate when the requirements are well understood. If your requirements are well understood, then we can go for specification, analysis, design, development, and implementation. If there is any issue in the requirements itself, we cannot go back and modify or rectify thing because it's not allowing for feedback process. Waterfall model describes a process of stepwise refinement based on hardware engineering models and widely used in military and aerospace industries. Because in military, the requirements are already fixed. We'll have the prototype or protocol. So whatever the prototype or protocol is created, according to the protocol and prototype, based on the strict rules and regulations, we'll go for the project or actual implementation. So there won't be any much change needed in military protocols because the rules and regulations are very strict. So we can make use of this model for military and aerospace based projects. The drawback of the waterfall model is the difficulty of accommodating change after the process is underway. So once you complete analysis and design, we need to go for only coding only. We cannot modify again requirements and analysis and design. Once coding is done, we should do only testing only. We cannot go and modify the previous stages. So that is the drawback. So the advantages of waterfall model are simple and easy to understand and use because it's having very simple steps like analysis, design, development, coding, and implementation. Easy to manage because in each stage we will perform a set of activities. So it is easy to manage. Phases are processed and completed one at a time. So we need to focus on only one stage at a time and we can complete the stage within the given time. Requirements are very well understood. The requirements are fixed in each stage. So in each stage, we need to execute only those activities and clearly defined stages. So it's having fixed stages, 6 stages. So we need to complete only the 6 stages to get the complete product. So that is the advantage. So the main drawbacks of waterfall model are once an application is in the testing stage, it is very difficult to go back and change the something that was not well thought out in the concept stage. So if you are in a third stage, we cannot go back to second stage or first stage to modify anything. So the back forward or feedback process is not allowed. No working software is produced until late during the life cycle. So while if you want to create a fixed life cycle product or a military kind of product, we can go with this model. High amounts of risk and uncertainty. So it's having a high amount of risk because all the specifications, whatever is mentioned, that should be implemented as it is, like a protocol. Not a good model for complex and object-oriented projects. So if the project is very complicated one, and it's having lot of components and other activities, and if it is object-oriented project, we cannot go with this waterfall model, because in object-oriented models, we can go for inheritance, polymorphism. So inheritance means again we will modify, we'll have new classes, new definitions, we'll have friend functions, all those things. So the object-oriented projects, waterfall model will not support. Poor model for long and ongoing projects. So if your project is a 2 years project, 3 years projects, and it is a real-time project for a long time, and we need, so the requirements will change within 1 year or within 6 months, the policies may change. So if you are doing the project for 2 years or 3 years, the policies may change, requirements may change, platform may change, the users may have new requirements. So in that case, we cannot modify the basic fixed requirements. So the feedback is not allowed here. So it is not suitable for long-term projects, not suitable for projects where requirements are at the moderate or high risk changing. So if the stock market kind of projects, the policies are changing, banking project with where the interest rates are changing, policies are changing for home loan. So in that case, the documents are changing, rules and regulations are changing often. In that case, we cannot go with this model. So these are the drawbacks of waterfall model. So the examples are, it can be used in CRM kind of systems, customer relationship management systems, and human resource management systems, where the policies, operations are fixed, and supply chain management systems, where we'll order maintenance, material management, so event management systems, because their orders, these kind of projects, they have fixed terms and policies. Point of scale kind of projects or change of projects, we can make use of this model. Development of object to Department of Defense, military and aircraft programs follow waterfall model in many organizations. This is because the strict standards and requirements that have been followed. So in military, Department of Defense and Air Force organizations, aircraft maintenance projects, we are using this waterfall model because the protocols, rules and regulations, policies are well defined, and they are fixed. They won't change it often. So those kind of projects, we can make use of this waterfall model. So any doubt so far in the waterfall model? Okay, please answer your attendance. All of you answer your attendance, type your names in the, because I need to mark the attendance in the Excel sheet. And I will send your attendance to the mentor as well as your class teachers. Those who are absent, as per yesterday's meeting discussion, those who are absent for 2-3 classes, the attendance marks will be reduced, and letters will be sent to the parents. So attendance is very, very important. Your attendance carries 5 marks. And assignment also carries 5 marks. Quiz carries another 5 marks. And open-ended test 1 and open-ended test 2 carries another marks. So you go through the material. I have already uploaded the material in the Google Classroom. You go through the material. If you have any doubt, you ask me in the next class. I think otherwise you can ask me in the, there will be some mentoring lectures as well as group discussion. So that time you can ask me, or you can send me through email or WhatsApp message, or you ask me in the next class. If you are having another class, you can leave the meeting and you can go. Those who are not given your attendance, please answer your attendance. Those who have given your attendance, you can leave the meeting. I will download this chat box. On the attendance given in chat box, I will enter the attendance in the Excel sheet as well as ERP. Those who entered your attendance, please leave the class. You can go with the next class. I think the next class starts by 9:45. And I have uploaded the assignment 1 in Google Classroom. Please submit, only one question is given. Submit the assignment on or before next Thursday. Okay, those who have given attendance, please, you can leave the class. Shall we end the class? All of you answered your attendance. Priyanka? Arji? Bandhavi, Arji Bandhavi, now only you are coming to the class. So those who have entered your attendance, please leave the class. Shreya, answered your attendance. Shall we end the class? Shah Yogendra Reddy. All of you answered. Shall we end the class? Meghna. Panchami. Rehan Yadav. Answered your attendance. Rishabh. Shall I end the class? All of you answered. Okay, shall I end the class now?